Okay. The last speaker in this session I'd like to introduce is Paula Mujica, who's going to give us a presentation investigating the carbon footprint of sheep production in Chile. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everywhere. As is known, ruminants contribute about 22% of anthropogenic emissions. Their contribution can be of two kinds, direct and indirect. The direct contribution is through the emission of methanol, carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide, and indirectly via the requirement of a production system, including fuel, pesticide, and fertilizants. Ruminants in Chile exceed 8 million head. As shown in figure, ovine represents 46.7%, cattle 44.7%, and goat 8.5%. In sheep, there are two productive areas with marked difference. In the southern zone has the higher number of sheep in Chile, where farms correspond to large ranch managed in the exhibit with natural resemble organic production. On the contrary, in the central zone are generally small. Management is semi-extensive, and the hand-on farm belong to family farming. The carbon footprint can be used as an indicator of the variation of greenhouse gases emission. International studies have developed a model to estimate the carbon footprint based on life cycle approach. So the study realized have two objectives, but in Chile, the relevant study and research about carbon footprint at various scales. So the study realized have two objectives. First, developing a simulation model of sheep semi-extensive grazing system for central zone of Chile. Second, to estimate the effect of a number of management practices of a rainfall variability of sheep production at its carbon footprint, and attempt also to estimate the contribution of this system to carbon sequestration. The study area is located in South America, in Chile, and corresponding to central area of the country. This area is characterized by irregular annual rainfall. The annual rainfall is between 520 and 1,000 millimeters, with about 100 and 600 millimeters in June and July. The main forest reserves are native pasture. Large proportion of the surface with natural pasture correspond to degraded soil by decades of cereal monocropping. Sheep production system in central Chile manage two sheep breeds, Suffolk and Merino. Suffolk flocks are usually in a small or medium-sized farm with less than 200 animals. Merino flocks belong to large farms with are driven as businesses and represent less than 10% of farm. Lamb are sold with 3 or 4 months and 30 and 35 kilos. Regarding animal feeding, the main of and cattle forest resource use correspond to native pasture and cereal straw. Supplementation is scarce and limited to some physiological states, like last year of pregnancy and early lactation, and when the availability of pastoral reserve is extremely scarce in summer or winter. Methodology cloud to farm gate was used to establish the limit of the system. Thus, most of the process development during the production lamb were considered. This includes animal emission, direct and indirect emission of manure management, and emission due to the use of fertilizant and cereal crop of forages. As a way to evaluate the ecosystem service provided by this pastoral production system, carbon sequestration in pasture and soil was considered. Emission associated with transport land to slaughter, maintenance of capital items, dispose of input container, production of veterinary input and veterinary inspection were not included. Thus, the carbon footprint was expressed as kilos of carbon dioxide per kilo of light weight of land. Model development was based on dynamic simulation model on bioeconomic performance of land production system developed by Aguilar et al. This model was adaptable. The modification included the adaptation of whole production cycle, that is to say, all productive and reproductive state, and you very incorporation of estimation of greenhouse gases emission and estimation of carbon sequestration. The model is organized in 5 modules, 3 of which have influence on carbon footprint. The first of these modules refers to animal management practice, where include the date of handled animal, supplementation strategy, and manure management. The second module allows selecting an agroclimate and include air temperature and wind velocity. The third module allows the selection of type of surface area of grassland information, including growth rate, protein, and digestive. For the estimation, the growth rate, the model of Castellaro-Esquella was used. This model estimates the growth of Mediterranean pasture using soil and climate data. Precipitation data of 43 years were used to create rainfall pattern. Through the use of precipitation and standard deviation, 3 rainfall patterns were defined: dry, average, and rainy. Rain-on pattern was incorporated in grassland module by varying the pasture growth rate regarding to level the precipitation. Equations used in the model relate to energy and protein requirement and dry matter intake, its relation with the productive performance. Emission of greenhouse gases are based on Tier 2 equation that relates gross energy intake to the production of gases. Stochastic variables include native and sow pasture growth rate, voluntary intake, and mortality of F and land. Based on data collection from farm visited and farm typology described by Toro, Mujica et al., 3 farm types were used as base scenario. The difference between farms as shown in the table are related to flock size, surface, pasture, stocking rate, managed breed, and relative presence of crop and livestock species. Experimental scenarios were generated through factor experiment. 3 management variables were evaluated: the effect of change on stocking rate, amount of supplementation, and presence or absence of small areas of sown pasture with fertilization for land wind. A rainfall pattern was considered a 4 factor. Considering scenarios basis and modification, a total of 90 combinations were evaluated, and 20 repetitions per combination were performed. Variables evaluated considering carbon footprint, with or without carbon sequestration, weight of land, weight of view. Finally, research allows us to obtain the following result. Rainfall data for the 3 rainfall patterns, dry, average, and rainy, allow the simulation of pasture growth rate. Rainfall in dry year was 30% lower than average year, leading to 40% decrease in dry matter production. In native pasture and 17% in sow pasture. A rainy year had 36% more rainfall than an average year, and dry matter production increased 10% and 60% for native pasture and sow pasture respectively. The base scenario shows the difference in carbon footprint between type of farm in the 3 analyzed precipitation patterns. dry years tend to have lower footprint despite having significantly smaller weight of land. The incorporation of carbon sequestration and as an ecosystem service decrease carbon footprint between 9% and for dry years and 20% for average year. The average carbon footprint for all experimental scenarios was 40.8 kilos, when carbon sequestration was not considered, and 20.8 kilos with consideration of this ecosystem service. This represents an increase of 25 and 27% of the average value of a base scenario. All factors studied have significant effect on carbon footprint, weight of land, and weight of view. If carbon sequestration is ignored, increased stocking rate decrease carbon footprint, without use the zone pasture. However, when carbon sequestration is considered as increase on the stocking rate produces an increase in footprint. In both scenarios, with or without carbon sequestration, the effect of rainfall pattern tend to be larger in scenarios with zone pasture, leaving in evidence the increased reliance of land on the availability of zone pasture. The stocking rate increase in all scenarios tend to decrease the weight of land. However, a smaller slope of decline in this year with more precipitation was observed, due to the increased availability of forage. A similar situation was observed in the weight of view, where increased stocking rates decreased the final weight of view. In both graphs, the effect of utilization of sow pasture on the weight of the animal is observed. In the case of land, wind and utilization of sow pasture decrease weight of land in favor of a smaller decrease of final weight of view. In all scenarios studied, enteric methane was the bigger emission, ranging between 70 and 87% of total emission. In the figure, it is also possible to see that increased stocking rate decreased carbon sequestration. In this graph, it is possible to observe how a slight effect on carbon sequestration are produced by incorporating some pasture and rainfall pattern. Besides, again, it is possible to appreciate the strong increase in carbon footprint due to the incorporation of some pasture, which means an increase or more than 50%. The analysis of the result obtained through experimental scenarios lead to the following conclusion. Intensification of cheese system using small areas of strategically managed zone pasture significantly high increased carbon footprint during the pasture establishment years. Thus, the evaluation of more management alternatives associated with the use of this resource is required. Increased stocking rate with feasible limits significantly decreased carbon footprint, but the changes were very modest. Supplementation strategy could increase productive efficiency with little or no change in carbon footprint. Thus, results demonstrate the existence of many trade-offs between production, technical efficiency, and environmental impact. Thus, they include ecosystem service can modify on carbon footprint on some variable management. Chick production systems show remarkable resilience in presence of reduced rainfall, thus confirming that they constitute a sustainable use of marginal land. And even more so is other ecosystem services and cultural value were taken into account. Nowadays, the simulation model can be useful as a tool for evaluating the impact the management, climate, and economic change inheres on the carbon footprint of cheese production system. Thank you.
Thank you. there any questions for Paula at all? Yeah, I've got one very quick question. Sorry, I've got a question. How are you going to take this information forwards? Are you planning some further work yourself, or is this going to be, are your results going to be reported to farmers in Chile in terms of how they might improve efficiencies of production?
In Chile, there are no systems for evaluate carbon footprint, and no certification that neither. The conclusion were published in a paper.
Okay. So you haven't got a very easy way to tell farmers of your results?
I don't understand.
Will the results of your project, will you give farmers information about how to improve efficiency based on your project?
The principal conclusion was the inclusion of carbon sequestration, that it's important to report this for politic public.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. Okay, I'd just like to thank everybody for attending the session and for contributing with your questions. I'd also like to just take the opportunity to remind you that there is a poster session every day during the conference, and there are some really good posters throughout this week, so please go and have a look at those. Other than that, I'd just like to say thank you very much and just draw this session to a close. Thank you.